The Keeper of Traken was in many ways the start of a new era for Doctor Who. It's the first in a loose trilogy that brings back the Master, as well as introducing 3 regular cast members to the show, 1 in each story. So it would be a fine starting point for anyone wanting to watch the 80s stories, as well as a perfectly good story in its own right. At the start, the Doctor is travelling with Adric. I do like their relationship. It's kind of a science fiction version of an elderly wizard and his young apprentice. Tom Baker is not at his best in this story, and in many scenes he barely makes much of a contribution. But in his scenes with Adric, he gets to play the professor who's irked by his know-it-all student, which is something new for the character to play after all these years. So it does help his performance in the first episode, if not the rest. The TARDIS is invaded by the Keeper of Traken, who you can tell is really old because of his pointy bald head and massive beard. He shows them videos to get them up to speed with what's going on, which is an interesting way of establishing the situation. Traken is basically a utopian society where the people want for nothing, and everyone lives in peace and harmony so long as the Keeper controls the source. It's a bit like the story The One to Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula Le Guin, only the Keeper isn't a kid. Although it's a world of high technology, it has a medieval feel to it with all the sets and costumes, so it feels kind of Shakespearean. In fact, the story is basically a tragedy, with this perfect society being slowly corrupted by the evil Melkor. He takes advantage of Cassia's understandable desire to save her husband Tremas from becoming the Keeper, only for Cassia to become the Keeper herself, which is rather ironic. And both Cassia and Tremas are dead by the end anyway, so it was all for nothing. It's a much more personal story than you usually get in Doctor Who, and it definitely helps it stand out from the rest. Melkor is an unusual villain. For most of the story, it's disguised as a statue, pretending it can't move, sneaking around when nobody's watching, and killing anybody who happens to glimpse it, which is perhaps not the best long-term strategy. It has a very distinctive look with a half-melted face that looks appropriately sinister, and Geoffrey Beevers' voice is a perfect complement. Of course, the big twist is that the Melkor is actually the Master's TARDIS, although somehow it is able to move around and shoot lasers from its eyes, which automatically makes it much better than the Doctor's TARDIS. It's not clear how people manage to get in and out, as it's not quite big enough to do it practically, so they kind of fuzz over the details. And the Master turns out to have another TARDIS at the end, which makes absolutely no sense. Why was he travelling with 2 TARDISes? Why did he spend decades just waiting there in the Grove? We may never know. But never mind. The actors are much stronger than usual. Sheila Ruskin as Cassia is the standout, going from innocent girl in the flashback scenes to concerned wife in the present, and eventually becoming a scheming Lady Macbeth type before she meets her tragic end. Anthony Ainley makes an immediate impression as Tremas. Here he's playing a kindly old man who the Doctor gets on famously with, and he's very likeable in the role, which is very different to his performance in all the subsequent stories. Sarah Sutton doesn't make much of an impact as Nyssa. She's really just another hyper-intelligent youngster for Adric to talk science with, and between them they do basically save the day. But it does feel like a bit of a missed opportunity. If they were making her a regular, they could have given her a few more dimensions to her personality. But we'll see how that develops over the coming months. The DVD has about 50 minutes of extras as part of the New Beginning trilogy box set. Being Nice to Each Other is the main 30-minute making-of documentary, with Sarah Sutton, Sheila Ruskin, as well as the producer, director and writer, all talking about the making of the show. Pretty standard stuff, really. There's a 10-minute feature on the return of the Master, with Christopher Bidby talking about how it happened, and Geoffrey Beevers proving that he can still do the voice. And there's a 10-minute clip from Swap Shop, where Noel Edmonds talks to Sarah Sutton about playing a blind girl in The Moon Stallion, which we get to see a clip from. Some kids phone in to ask her questions, and she gets to give away one of the props, which I wouldn't mind winning myself, but it's probably fallen apart by now. Overall, it's a strong story, with a likeable cast of characters and a great villain. Definitely one of the high points of the era. I'll give it an 8. Next week, the final Tom Baker story, Legopolis. It's also the first Tom Baker story that I remember watching, so you'll be getting memories from my childhood from now on. So press subscribe if you like the sound of that, and I'll see you next time.